Hello, Euphemism here, and welcome to my comprehensive musical critique series. In this series, I will be discussing the music of various artists in excruciating detail, meaning I will be examining their music on an album-by-album, song-by-song basis. I will be critiquing performance, songwriting, production, and everything in between. So why not open the series with my favorite band, Nirvana? Of course, there are multiple personal reasons as to why this band is my particular favorite, and I could make an entirely different series of videos telling my story and how it relates to this band. Suffice it to say that their music helped me navigate the rough waters of my adolescence by aiding to make sense of the negativity I experienced on a daily basis. I found a cathartic pleasure in the sheer energy of their performances, as well as an equally powerful yet less noisy solace in the poetry of Kurt's words, as well as the uniqueness of his melodies and the authenticity of his voice. Not only that, but Nirvana inspired me to become a musician myself, both as a drummer and a singer-songwriter, and I owe a great deal of my life's incredible musical experiences to this band. That being said, I am not here to discuss reasons why I am personally connected to their music, but rather the opposite. I am here to prove why their music is good, objectively. The goal of this series is to solidify Nirvana's status as one of the greatest bands of all time through a comprehensive and objective critique of their craft and everything that went into it. And I mean everything. From the drum beat to the lyrics to the production of each and every one of their songs, this series will take us through Bleach, Nevermind, Incesticide, and In Utero, not to mention Unplugged in New York and of course their infamous B-sides, as well as posthumously released songs like You Know You're Right and demos like Do Re Mi and Opinion. And Nirvana is only the beginning. In the future, I hope to make comprehensive review videos of the dozens of artists whom I believe are in dire need of solidification. In other words, there is much that has yet to be said of many worthy musicians which I will, in good time, attempt to say here. But for now, I am discussing Nirvana. And although I greatly appreciate both the criticism and commentary of Nirvana fans on this series, and though I hope I can afford you greater insight into their music, these videos are really for the people who don't like Nirvana, the ones who call them overrated, or too simplistic, or whatever. I am here to prove, once and for all, that Nirvana is, if anything, underrated. I will argue this point throughout the series, using various forms of critical judgment. For example, since I am a songwriter, a lot of my love for Nirvana is based on techniques that I am aware can be very difficult to utilize or create. Same goes for my experience as a performing musician, a poet, and a producer. I am going to prove that as musicians, the members of Nirvana were among the greatest performers of all time, and as a songwriter, Kurt deserves to be remembered as a legend. You could, of course, write this off as lionization, but hear me. If these things I say are delusions, then they are albeit well-founded ones, and I will back them up. Unlike many Nirvana fans, I do not worship Kurt, and I have no illusions about him as a person. Apparently, he could be quite an asshole at times, whiny, self-centered, narcissistic, and even cruel. As a teenager, for example, he strangled a cat and shoved it up his father's chimney, at least according to certain sources. He was a junkie, and he couldn't handle the pressure of fame, and he abandoned his wife and infant daughter. But Kurt's character, actions, and motivations have been analyzed to death, no pun intended, and I have no intention of making this series all about his life. This is all about his music, about what he invented, which I am judging on the merit of its aesthetic value, its ingenuity, its diversity, and its timelessness, all qualities removed from the character of their creator. I think, for example, we can all agree that Ender's Game is a fantastic novel, despite the fact that Orson Scott Card is a homophobic asshole. Anyway, I postulate that Kurt Cobain was among the best mainstream pop songwriters the world has ever seen. This melodramatic statement, however, will not go unaccompanied. I will back up this claim throughout these videos. That being said, if you think this is idol worship, then listen to these reviews and explain to me how I am wrong. First, some album facts. Nirvana's debut album was recorded between December 1988 and January 1989 for a grand total of $606.17. Kurt Cobain played guitar and vocals, Chris Novoselic played bass, and Chad Channing played drums, except for the songs Floyd the Barber, Downer, and Paper Cuts, which were recorded with Dale Crover on the drums. Kurt wrote every song except for Love Buzz, the album's only cover, originally by Shocking Blue, and Chris is credited as a co-writer on Big Cheese. The album is 42 minutes and 37 seconds long. It was released on June 15, 1989, and produced by Jack Endino. The black and white photo used for the album cover was taken by Kurt's then-girlfriend Tracy Marander when Nirvana played a show at the Reco Muse Art Gallery. This picture features Jason Everman, a guitarist who played with Nirvana during the Bleach era. Although Everman's guitar work is not featured on the album, he did contribute a hefty sum to have it produced. Now, the way this series is going to work is I'm going to go through the album song by song in chronological order. Obviously, I will be making numerous references throughout this review. Many of those references are video references, such as songs or live performances of those songs, whether by Nirvana or other bands. Whenever you hear a reference to a song that you maybe haven't heard, you can bet that I linked it in the description. To make it easy to find these links, after each time I linked a song, I'm going to say link 2B or link 5C, depending on the song I'm talking about. For example, the song Blue is the first song on Bleach, so that would be link 1. If you look at the description, you'll see Blue is link number 1. Then when I link something during my review of Blue, it will be link 1A. School, the second song, will be link 2, and anything linked under school will be link 2A, 2B, so on and so forth. If you hear a reference that you cannot find linked, let me know and I'll find it. Without further ado, here is my comprehensive critique of Bleach. Blue, link 1. For a variety of reasons removed from the merit of the actual song itself, Blue is very important. First, the obvious. This is the very first song on the very first Nirvana album. Whether or not a song's chronological whereabouts is important to fans, this song was clearly important to Kurt. Most bands just starting out would open their first album with a song expected to be a hit. Appetite for Destruction opens with Welcome to the Jungle, Dirt opens with Them Bones, Bad opens with Bad, etc. Now, of course, plenty of bands open albums with songs that aren't singles, but to do so is a common practice, and it makes logical sense. Today it's different, but back then you either heard music on the radio or off a record or CD, and the bands hoped, if you bought either of the latter two, that you would listen to the album from start to finish. Hopefully the first song would catch you. Kurt evidently thought that Blue would catch people. One could argue that Kurt was a true punk rocker and he didn't care what anyone thought, and so he just said, fuck it, I want Blue first. But I disagree, especially when you consider that Smells Like Teen Spirit is the first song on Nevermind. I do believe that a lot of Nirvana's success is rooted in their nonconformity, and the genius of Kurt's songwriting similarly stems from a rejection of social norms and an admirable artistic apathy. More on that when we get to Negative Creep, though. And yet, although they may have despised the mainstream, Kurt was not an idiot when it came to the music business. He was ambitious, and he had at least a basic understanding of the music industry. Obviously, I don't think he would have been as successful otherwise. In no way am I saying that he sold out or whatever other bullshit, but I believe that throughout his career he frequently knew exactly what he was doing and why, at least in terms of artistic and marketing decisions. Every action was deliberate, even the stupid ones, and thus I highly doubt Kurt selected Blue to be the first song on Bleach without reason. In retrospect, About a Girl seems the obvious choice for the album opener since it is and was Bleach's most popular song, but it is likely that Kurt thought About a Girl misrepresented the album as a whole, which it does. Bleach is surely a musical achievement, sonically and poetically, and its art never second-guesses itself, but if you consider all of the songs together, About a Girl is certainly the anomaly. Blue, on the other hand, resides in the same realm, or genre if you prefer, as most of the other songs, containing the heavy sludge of tracks like Sifting and Paper Cuts, the groove of songs like Mr. Mustache and Big Cheese, and the dry, heavy metal distortion of Downer and Floyd the Barber. And yet Blue also reflects aspects of About a Girl, specifically in its melodic, albeit heavy, verses, its contagious transitions, and of course, Kurt's vocal performance. In this sense, Blue could be seen as a bridge between About a Girl and the rest of the album, a way to prepare the listener for a genreless journey through the hazy, sonic insanity and melodic ingenuity of Kurt's earliest work. It's also a simple way to say, our music is diverse. Nirvana's music has always been diverse, as exemplified so shockingly on this album. Indeed, the difference between About a Girl and songs like Paper Cuts is almost too vast to bear, especially for first-time listeners. Thus, Blue serves as a buffer between those songs, proving not only Kurt's skills as a songwriter, but the band's ability to mock and surpass contemporary metal bands. But strategy aside, this is one of those few Nirvana gems that was apparently beloved by its own creator, as evidenced by the fact that Blue stayed in their setlist until the very end. It is amazing and eerie in a way to watch performances of this song in videos spanning the entirety of Nirvana's career, from the cramped corner of a Los Angeles record shop in 1989, the band rushing through the song, Kurt screaming like he's about to die, to 3 years later when they play the same song to thousands of fans at their famous Reading show in 1992, and they play it once more in March 1994 during their last ever gig in Germany, 1 month before Kurt's suicide. Links 1A, 1B, and 1C. I highly recommend watching each performance of this song, from Rhino Records to Reading to Munich. It is an uncanny experience. In this short period of 5 years, Nirvana grows from a poorly mixed garage band into one of the biggest, most important groups in the history of popular music, and we have the privilege of being able to witness the transition. The Kurt of 1989 is quiet, polite, and nervous. He awkwardly thanks the audience for coming before his embryonic band, with Chad Channing on drums, ends the show with Blue. By the performance of 92, he has evolved into his most well-known stage persona, apathetic, dazed, and overall trance-like, as a prophet having a vision. But the Reading version of Blue is so much more polished and slowed down than the Los Angeles version that it sounds almost like a different song. The Munich concert, as usual, is painful to listen to, knowing its chronological proximity to Kurt's death, but it is telling that Blue is the penultimate song on the Munich setlist. They end their final show with Heart-Shaped Box, which makes Blue the second to last song they ever played live. How fitting it would have been if Blue were the last song they played, since it was of course the first song on their first album. Oh well, it's close enough. On its own, Blue is one of the rare Nirvana songs that allows Kurt to show off his guitar skills. He is not known for his guitaristry, of course, but he clearly could play well enough to front the biggest band on the planet in the early 90s. The song opens with a bass riff, however, courtesy of the amiable and gangly Chris Novoselic, who, in my opinion, is highly underrated. There were a lot of factors that led to Nirvana's success, and we could spend hours talking about them. And I will do that at some point. But right now, I just want to say that it is the bass that makes a Nirvana song a true Nirvana song. People always talk about how much they love Kurt, or his voice, or Dave's drums, but I rarely hear them mention the bass. Of course, Kurt's voice and Dave's drums are just as important, but without the bass, a Nirvana song is not a Nirvana song. It is simply a Kurt song, and that's another artist entirely. Of course, on Bleach, we've got Chad's drums rather than Dave's drums, but the bass playing of Novoselic still stands out. In this way, Blue foreshadows the importance of the bass in Nirvana's career by making sure that the very first instrument a listener hears on the very first Nirvana album is a bass guitar. Although Blue does follow the standard verse-chorus-verse format to which the majority of Nirvana songs adhere, it does so in a constantly escalating manner. Kurt begins the song by melding the pitch of his voice exactly with the pitch of the guitar riff, a vocal trick that sets the stage for that classic, apathetic Nirvana vibe, and which, a year later, he would repeat in the famous post-chorus of Teen Spirit. You know, the part that's like, da-na-na-na-na-na, yay, da-na-na-na-na. It also speaks to Kurt's natural vocal ability, because as far as I've read or seen, he never received a formal singing lesson, and I've done a lot of research on this. However, He may have learned and perfected this vocal melding trick while playing Love Buzz, the only cover song that Nirvana ever put onto an album, if you exclude Incesticide and Unplugged in New York, which is a compilation album and a live album, respectively. Nevertheless, the trick works well to establish Nirvana's unique presence as a heavy metal band with a pop singer. Remember, Bleach was released before the word grunge became a household term to describe the genre, and even Courtney Love, upon first hearing the album, proclaimed that it was, quote, too metal for her. In the beginning, what really set Nirvana apart was Kurt's voice and his lyrics. Though I will never fail to praise his skills as a songwriter, if Nirvana had never come out with an album after Bleach, they never would have been credited with inventing an entirely new genre. But they needed Bleach to get to Nevermind, and that's why it's so important. It's an exercise in self-teaching. Through trial and error, they learned to become one of the most original and important bands of their generation. If you take away Kurt's voice, then you have to admit that most of the songs on Bleach, as well as the overall tone of the album, sound quite similar to Nirvana's contemporaries. Without Kurt, the Bleach-era Nirvana sounds like a talented, albeit punk-oriented metal band, playing riff after riff after heavy riff. Add Kurt's voice to the mix and you get something else entirely, the birth of a new style of music, which would be fully realized on Nevermind and further perfected on In Utero. If you listen to the 1988 demo version of Blue, you hear Kurt's inventiveness clearer than ever. Link 1D. In this version, Kurt sings the chorus in a soft, pseudo-falsetto, and the effect is in equal parts mesmerizing and haunting. It's the last voice you'd expect to hear on such a heavy metal song, and yet Kurt does have a metal voice, at least when he wants to. On any version of Blue, you can hear him using both his laid-back, ambivalent voice and his heavy, abrasive, screaming voice. But he only uses his ambivalent voice for the first verse, opening the song and therefore the album with the words, "If you wouldn't mind, I would like to blue." Kurt Cobain was a better songwriter than he was a lyricist, and although I try my best to avoid forced, pseudo-intellectual interpretations of his lyrics, I have to admit that these opening lines are retrospectively spot on. They perfectly reflect Nirvana's disposition at the time and, like the opening bass riff, foreshadow the rest of their career. Before Nevermind, Nirvana was riotous and loud, but offstage they were also contradictorily polite. But as people, they were soft-spoken, quirky individuals, at least according to every account of them I've ever read and every backstage video I've ever seen. As I stated earlier, before playing Blue at Rhino Records in 1989, Kurt, in an awkward, quiet voice, thanks everyone for coming, and then launches into a song so heavy and so loud that the audience may have been concerned for the windows of the establishment receiving such aural abuse. It's the classic case of an introverted artist undergoing a veritable onstage transformation. Offstage, they may be polite and quiet, but onstage, they're either flamboyant or monstrous or both. Thus, the opening lyrics of their first album wonderfully meld their on- and off-stage personas, passively asking, "if you wouldn't mind," before exploding into the carnage that we know and love so well. Indeed, watching Kurt speak to that audience, you feel as if he's thanking them for giving the band permission to play, as if he's too polite and empathetic to perform his music unless someone asks it of him. It's easy to picture him saying, "If you wouldn't mind, I would like to play another song," but instead on Blue he says, "If you wouldn't mind, I would like to blue." Taken out of the context I just described, I suspect this line, along with the rest of the song, has no deeper lyrical meaning. It's grammatically incorrect in a fascinating way, which also foreshadows the rest of Kurt's lyrical career, and it reflects, as I described, an oxymoronic passive cacophony, but that's about it. In the second verse, he switches out the word blue for lose, which fatefully anticipates the first verse of his most famous song and the lyrics, "It's fun to lose." Thus, these two album openers have something in common, meaning that even on his first album, Kurt was already capturing that Generation X childlike apathy that would define his band and generation, despite the fact that Bleach is so different from Nevermind. Nevertheless, he never considered lyrics. Nevertheless, he did not consider lyrics as important as the music itself. Kurt himself said numerous times that to him, the music was more important than the lyrics. He even said, quote, "When I write a song, the lyrics are the least important subject," end quote. This quote is further supported by demo versions of even his most famous songs. For example, if you listen to the 1988 demo of Blue, you hear him making up words that go along with the melody. To Kurt, the melody was the most important factor of any song, and once he had that established, only then would he come up with lyrics, sometimes scratching them out in the studio just minutes before making a final recording. Occasionally, he would come up with those lyrics during jam sessions, sounding out vowels with his iconic voice until something sounded right. The one clever lyric in Blue is the end of the chorus, which says, quote, "Here is another word that rhymes with shame," end quote. This is an early glimpse of Kurt's shrewd, sarcastic wit, which would go on to define him and his band. It's as though he's ironically making fun of the music he's playing while playing it seriously. It's almost satire. Instead of singing about love or sex or heartache or despair like most of his mainstream contemporaries were doing, i.e. Michael Jackson, Madonna, Poison, he takes a shortcut, stripping the form bare and showing us the truth behind the histrionic lyricist, seeming to tell his listeners, here, this has a self-deprecating tone, so here's another word that rhymes with shame, there you go. The song ends with a classic Cobain repeat. In this case, he repeats the lyrics, "You could do anything," over and over, and he even adds a little country twang to his voice, pronouncing anything as anything. So who is he talking to? Us? His band? Himself? If it's the latter, then he was right. He could do anything, musically speaking. So when the song ends, it only gets better from there.